Welcome. Today, we're diving into the second chapter of Paul's letter to the Galatians. Now, this is where the Apostle Paul really moves from telling his personal story to standing on the battle line. He's defending the very heart of our Christian faith. You see, this is an absolutely crucial passage. It safeguards the core of the church by connecting what we believe directly to how we live.
So, to really grasp this chapter, we're going to look at it in a few parts. We'll start with the gospel affirmed in Jerusalem, then see it defended in Antioch. After that, we'll unpack the doctrine of justification and our union with Christ, and finally, we'll talk about living the crucified life and wrap up with a conclusion.
Part 1. A gospel affirmed in Jerusalem. Okay, so here we find the Apostle Paul looking back on a really critical visit he made to the leaders of the church in Jerusalem. And let me tell you, this visit was a major test of the unity of the entire early Christian mission.
So imagine this. 14 years after his last visit, Paul heads back to Jerusalem. And he's not alone. He's got Barnabas and a Gentile believer named Titus with him. Now this is absolutely key. Paul says he went in response to a revelation. This wasn't because the leaders in Jerusalem summoned him. No, this was a divinely prompted trip. He wasn't going there to get their approval or permission for his ministry. He was going to ensure they were all unified around the one true gospel he'd been preaching so successfully among the Gentiles.
Now, to really understand what's at stake here, we have to look at the bigger picture of God's plan. This whole confrontation is happening in a brand new era, what we call the dispensation of grace, or the church age. So what's a dispensation? Well, it's just a particular way God runs his household, so to speak, how he administers his will on earth during a specific period. The era before this was the dispensation of law given to Israel, but now things have shifted dramatically. The way everyone, whether you're a Jew or a Gentile, relates to God is now through grace by faith in Jesus Christ. And it's this new reality that's being put to the test.
So Paul gets to Jerusalem and meets privately with the pillars of the church, James, Peter, and John. And the outcome of this meeting was just huge. First off, they didn't add a single thing to Paul's message. His gospel was completely affirmed. Second, and this was the real test case, Titus, who was a Greek, was not forced to be circumcised. I mean, this was a living, breathing example that salvation is by grace through faith, period. It has nothing to do with the works of the law. Paul absolutely stood his ground against these false brothers who were trying to spy on their freedom and drag everyone back into the bondage of legalism. And in the end, the leaders gave Paul the right hand of fellowship. They recognized that God had given Peter a ministry to the Jews and Paul a ministry to the Gentiles. Two different missions, but one single gospel.
Part 2. A gospel defended in Antioch. All right, this scene now shifts from that high-level meeting in Jerusalem to a very public, very tense confrontation in the church at Antioch. This is where the gospel faced a threat, not from the outside, but from within.
And who was at the center of this crisis? None other than the Apostle Peter. You see, in the church at Antioch, which was a mix of Jewish and Gentile believers, Peter had been living out the freedom of the gospel. He was eating with the Gentiles, sharing meals, which was a huge symbol of their unity in Christ. But then, some men from the circumcision party showed up, sent from James in Jerusalem. And out of fear of what these men would think, Peter backed away. He withdrew from the Gentiles and started eating separately.
Now, you have to understand, this wasn't just a social blunder or bad manners. Peter's hypocrisy sparked a full-blown theological crisis. It went right to the heart of ecclesiology, that is, the doctrine of the church itself. What is the church? By separating himself, Peter's actions were preaching a false gospel. He was sending a message that faith in Jesus, well, it wasn't quite enough. His actions created two different classes of believers, first-class Jewish Christians and second-class Gentiles who needed to follow Jewish customs to be fully accepted. It was undermining the entire foundation of our unity in Christ.
Paul saw this and immediately understood how dangerous it was. Peter's actions were public, so the correction had to be public. I mean, this hypocrisy was so powerful that it was leading other Jewish believers astray, and even, can you believe it? Even Paul's close partner Barnabas got swept up in it. So Paul did the hard thing. He courageously confronted Peter to his face. This wasn't about personal conflict. It was because Peter's conduct was completely out of step with the truth of the gospel. The integrity of the gospel itself was hanging in the balance.
Part 3. The doctrine of justification. So this dramatic public confrontation with Peter serves as a launching pad for Paul to explain the theological core of his entire letter. We're getting to the very heart of the matter now. Paul's argument to Peter builds to this incredible declaration. Just listen to this. A person is not justified by the works of the law, but by faith in Jesus Christ.
So we, too, have put our faith in Christ Jesus that we may be justified by faith in Christ and not by the works of the law, because by the works of the law, no one will be justified. Did you catch that? He says it 3 times in one verse for maximum emphasis. This right here is the heart of soteriology, the doctrine of salvation. Paul is making it absolutely clear. Even Jewish believers who know the law inside and out understand that being made right with God has nothing to do with keeping rules. It comes only through faith in Jesus Christ.
So let's be really clear about what this word justification means. It's a legal term. Think of a courtroom. Justification is not a process where God slowly makes you a better person. No, it's a one-time legal act where God, the judge, declares a guilty sinner to be righteous in his sight. And how can he do that? Not based on anything we've done, but based entirely on the perfect life and finished work of Jesus Christ, which gets credited to our account the moment we believe.
So the foundation is this. Justification is by faith alone. The Reformers called this sola fide. It's completely separate from any works of the law. And when Paul says that, he's talking about the whole package, not just the 10 Commandments, but also the ceremonial laws, the dietary restrictions, circumcision, all the things that marked out the nation of Israel. You can't earn this. You can't work for it. Justification is a free gift given by God's grace, received through faith, and based on the work of Christ and Christ alone.
Part 4. The believer's union with Christ. Okay, this incredible doctrine of justification doesn't just stay as a legal concept. It leads to an equally amazing reality in our personal lives. Let's look at what that is.
And this right here is Paul's personal testimony. It flows right out of the truth of justification. He says, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Now listen, that is not just beautiful poetry, that's a statement of fact. It's a profound spiritual reality. When you trust in Christ, you are spiritually united with him in everything he did, his death, his burial, and his resurrection.
So what does this mean for you? Well, to be crucified with Christ means that your old self, the person you were before Christ, bound by sin and condemned by the law, that person has been legally executed. You've died to the law's power to condemn you. But it's not just about what you died to. It's about what you're alive in. You've been raised to a whole new life, which is literally the life of Christ himself living in you through his Spirit. And this new life isn't about trying harder. It's sustained by a daily, moment-by-moment trust in the Son of God who proved his personal love for you on that cross.
Part 5. Living the crucified life. Okay, so if this is our new reality, if Christ is living in us, how does that actually change the way we live day to day? Let's get practical.
So, how do we put this into practice? First, we've got to hold on tight to the gospel truth. Just like Paul, we have to be ready to defend the pure gospel from anyone who tries to add Christ plus anything. Second, we live by daily faith. This isn't about self-effort. It's about a daily reliance on Christ's power working in us. Third, we need to practice courageous accountability. That whole showdown between Paul and Peter shows us we have a responsibility to speak the truth in love to each other to help keep our behavior in line with what we say we believe. And finally, we remember the poor. It's interesting, isn't it? The only thing the apostles asked Paul to do was remember the poor. It's because the grace that saves us should naturally overflow in generosity toward others. That's a mark of genuine faith.
Conclusion and final blessing. All right, let's bring all these powerful threads together.
So to sum it all up, Galatians chapter 2 is like a guardian at the gate of the gospel. In Jerusalem, we saw the unity of the gospel affirmed. In Antioch, we saw the integrity of the gospel defended. And the bedrock underneath it all is that unshakable truth: justification is by faith alone. This chapter teaches us a crucial lesson. Right belief isn't just an idea in our heads. It has to lead to right living and right relationships with each other in the church.
Paul brings it all home with this final, powerful statement. I want you to hear it one more time. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing. You see, to go back to trying to earn our salvation through the law is to nullify, to cancel out the grace of God. It's like saying Christ's death was for nothing, a complete waste. That is the choice, plain and simple, the grace of God or the works of man. You can't have it both ways.
And so I want to leave you with this blessing today. May you find your deepest rest in the finished work of Christ. May you live out each day not in your own strength, but by a simple faith in the Son of God who loves you and who gave himself for you. And may you stand firm, and I mean
firm in the wonderful freedom of his glorious gospel. For more in-depth studies, visit the Grace and Knowledge series blog at woodybrohm.online.